And I think it's like kind of a false dichotomy in that like you want to be both. Like if you're just
Mhm.
better, you blend in. If you're just different, you're not valuable. But if you're differently better, then that's the important part. Like it's almost like, why is your difference better? Right? That's the key.
The Business Owner's Journey. I'm Nick Berry, and I've got real business owners telling their real stories, sharing their real lessons and strategies so you don't have to figure it all out on your own. My guest is Joe Daniels. He's a strategist, positioning expert, and trusted advisor to agencies, creators, and solo business owners. And Joe puts his money where his mouth is. Instead of just talking shop, we put Joe to the test and had him workshopping my business positioning, live, unscripted, using his 4-pillar methodology. So it's a real-time deep dive with all the tough questions, uncomfortable decisions, and candid course corrections that come along with that. Expect to learn how you can clarify your niche by actually doing the work, what happens when you separate your identity from your business, how to spot the blind spots that are killing your growth, his take on what truly makes a point of view unique, the worst and the best ways to position yourself against your competitors, how to handle the uncomfortable choices most founders avoid, whether relentless focus really pays off, what it's like to get called out live on your own assumptions, how Joe learned to uncover clients' it factors, and the real value of working with someone who won't let you dodge the hard questions. It's a glimpse of the mind and methodology of Joe Daniels. Let's jump in.
My whole thing is about essentially finding that unique point of view or perspective on your industry or category or whatever you want to call it, the market that you're in, which it does two things. Like it grabs the attention um, of prospects because it's different. You're saying a different thing to what everyone else in the world is saying. And as you know, there's loads of noise out there. Attention is one of the biggest things you need to get right now, and so the way to do that isn't by saying the same thing more or louder. It's by saying a different thing entirely. And so having that unique perspective allows you to do that. But the other thing it does is actually kind of almost render the competition obsolete if you do it right. It's kind of almost being like, actually, like if you've got this specific problem, the current solution isn't working. It just doesn't, it, for whatever reason, it's not effective. My solution is effective because of this reason. And if you can make that argument in a compelling way, it doesn't just differentiate you from the competition, it almost puts you in a different box altogether. It's almost like, well, actually, now you're really the only person that can solve that problem
Mm-hmm.
for those specific people. And that's a really powerful thing if you can get that right. It's not easy to get right, but it's a really powerful thing if you can. And so what I did was realize I've learned this. I've realized that this is a thing that people need in very crowded markets, at least. And I helped agencies at Treacle develop theirs as part of the work we did. And when I left, I started working with startups, and also more recently, I've started working with, so I'm going to say solopreneur. I hate the word, but solo business owners, freelancers, consultants,
Creator
whatever.
businesses.
Yeah. Anyone that's like a one person operation as well, especially if they're, there's a lot of freelancers who are in the most crowded markets. If you take like, I don't know, like a copywriter, well, there's probably too many of them realistically, right? So like, I think it's really important to stand out there. And
Like a
what I do,
business coach.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, too many business coaches, all with podcasts as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think my process, it came about through observation and through working with clients over and over. Like by solving the same problem over and over, each iteration kind of solidified my own process. It wasn't like I just dreamt it up out of nowhere. It was based on stuff that's like actually theoretically been shown to be a good thing, and B, doing it myself, tweaking things here and there, and kind of just adjusting my process slightly each time. And I think it's probably never going to be finished. Realistically, I think that's the other interesting thing here is that
Mm-hmm.
my methodology is always going to be tweaked as times change, as opinions change, as my opinion changes, right? But the core principles of it are probably the same throughout. And so what I have now is a point of view canvas, and there are essentially four pillars to this canvas. The first one is all about your ICP. So let's define, the type of business that you're wanting to work with and the person at that business, because obviously a B2B is kind of a two-pronged approach in terms of who that is. That's really the first step, because actually the more specific you can get with that, the stronger the rest of it's going to be. You don't have to necessarily niche down by like, oh, I'm doing it for sports brands or something like that. It doesn't have to be an industry. You could kind of just niche down by other things, like it could be size or location. It could be maturity in terms of like, like maybe they're just about ready to sell their business, right? And that in itself is already quite a small subsection. But the other thing that I think is really interesting to niche down around, and this is the second pillar, is like a problem that they have. And I think what's really interesting about doing that is that if I say, oh, I am a consultant and I work with startups to help them with their marketing, well, yes, I'm niched down, but there's still a lot of others doing the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
There's
so
got to be
yes, it's
some other defining characteristic that you're at.
exactly. There's got to be something else that you need to do deeper. Not to mention the fact that sometimes people pick a niche of an industry for no real reason. So, like, I've had clients where they'll be like, oh, we work just with food brands. And when I'm like, but why just food brands? Like, what is it about what you do that doesn't apply to anyone else? They don't have an answer for that, right? It's like, well, actually, I could do it for anyone. It's like, so then what? The food brands is just a thing that you've decided to target people from a marketing perspective, but from a positioning perspective, there's no validation there. And so when you focus in on a problem instead, you become obsessed with solving that one problem, and anyone who has that problem then becomes a valid client for you.
And
And
those are like
so,
that's the material characteristics. Like it's not fucking demographic. It's not their
yeah,
fucking 865 to set. That drives me insane.
yeah,
So when you like internally, we try to talk about it in terms of when you have your ICP,
yeah,
and it does include a lot all those other attributes, but knowing like what we call the marriage material. Like
mm,
there are a few attributes about that ICP that separate the one you married from the ones that you dated for a long time,
right, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
And if you don't know the difference in the marriage material criteria or characteristics and the others, you pick dog food brands or whatever it was. Like
yeah.
you pick the wrong attribute to check.
Yep. And I think part of that also comes down to the I in ICP, right? The ideal part I think a lot of people forget that and think that they have to cover this broad spectrum, because it's like, oh, but I could work with them and I could work with them. And it's like, yeah, you can, but ideally, like
Yeah.
who's like the dream client? Like when you start thinking about that, I think it helps kind of just harness that thinking and hone it a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, so I guess the second pillar that I'm talking about here is this problem, which is essentially that the two parts of this are like they're trying to achieve something. I mean, they're trying to achieve lots of things, but your job is to pick one of these things. But something's getting in their way. There's an obstacle in their way. Something's stopping them from achieving it currently, and that is the problem that you're going to focus on. You're basically identifying this is what they're trying to achieve. Cool, but why can't they achieve it? That's really the key question. Because if you can solve that, and then you are suddenly really valuable to them as a partner or whatever, as a consultant. So so that's the second pillar. The third pillar is what I call the blind spot, and this is where we start thinking about it from a competitive standpoint. And so what we have is let's identify who your competitor, like the main primary competitor, is, and it's important to note that that isn't necessarily someone else like you. It might be if you're in a crowded market, it probably is. Sometimes it's like an old way of doing things. So like if you're a tech company, it might be that you're replacing pen and paper, right? Like in which case,
Mm-hmm.
that's actually the competitor at the moment. So it requires a bit of digging down. It might be for a lot of freelancers, the competition is in house. It might be that actually that's the main competitor here, is that they're fine doing it in house, and your
Mm-hmm.
job is going to have to be, well, why should you pick me over in house?
So it's like
Um,
alternative methods. other ways
Yes,
other than
yeah.
the way that you do it. Yeah.
Yeah. What's like almost like their current way of trying to solve that problem. And what you do is you kind of, what I like to do is kind of put a name to this approach to solving a problem. And I'll get onto the naming thing later on because there's a lot to unpack there. But like the idea is that you identify a way of solving that problem rather than just calling out specific competitors. So I wouldn't, if I was in competition with you, I wouldn't go, oh, well, this guy, Nick, he's really bad because he does this. What I would do is I would identify a common thing that you do and other business coaches do and
Hmm.
say, this is called, I'll call it this. I don't know, it's called, I don't know, I can't think of an example, but it's, I'll give it a name and I'll say,
Yeah.
that's the
Guru-itis.
concept. Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah. Guru, like that's the concept that I then fight against. And so I'm fighting against you indirectly, but really I'm saying this is an industry problem that these guys have. And
Hmm.
I'm on the outside going, no, this isn't the right way to do it. And basically you say, okay, well, why doesn't this approach work? What's because if it does work, they don't have the problem in the first place, right? So for some reason, this current approach to solving it isn't enough. It's not doing the job. So you have to figure out, okay, well, why is that the case? And then once you've done that, the final and fourth pillar is the opportunity one. And that's all about you, which is okay, well, here's my approach instead. This is what I do instead of this old approach that I've identified. Here's why it's different. Here's the main point of difference. And more importantly, here's why that difference works. And that's the really important bit here is like, it's all well and good saying, oh, I do things differently, but it also has to be, it's like that whole better versus different thing. And I think it's like kind of a false dichotomy in that like you want to be both. Like if you're just
Hmm.
better, you blend in. If you're just different, you're not valuable. But if you're differently better, then that's the important part. Like it's almost like, why is your difference better? Right. That's the key. Um, so yeah, that's the four kind of pillars of my approach, right? Is to basically figure out what is the answer to each of those things
Hmm.
and combine them all together. And that's then the sort of point of view that you're taking to the market.
Okay. And so, like, there's what we're doing here so we could try to demonstrate that as much as possible through a podcast episode. But like,
Yep.
how with a typical client engagement for you, I'm sure it looks much different, and you're able to do like it's more in depth. So you want to like give us a little bit of a baseline for what we're about to see.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, normally this whole happens in maybe a 2 to 3 hour workshop. It's quite intense. It's a lot of thinking on the client's part. And I think what's really interesting is when I first started doing this, when I was back at Treacle, I was very much like oh, I'll just come in and be the savior. Do you know what I mean? I'll have the answers, blah, blah, and have that kind of hero complex thing going on. And as I have matured as a consultant and got older and wiser, I've been like, actually, though, it's not on me to have the answer because I don't know your business or your world as much as you do. What I've found routinely is the answer's already in your head, and probably there's too many answers in your head. What I can do with my structure and questioning and so on, and my approach is to basically force you to prioritize and pick one of these through lines and connect those thoughts together in a way that then makes sense to everyone else. Because if a point of view only exists in your head, it doesn't really count for anything, right? So like it has to be explainable outwardly, and that's really the value I bring. Is almost like I call it like founder therapy, where like I basically just
Yeah.
help them get it out of your head, and I'm
Yeah.
sure it's similar to you with the work you do, but
Yeah. So I really like hearing you say, I force people to choose because the answer's already in there, right? But what typically, from my experience, is no one has forced them to make the choice, the hard choice, right?
yeah,
We'll have the conversation, we'll bang around like, well, it could be this for this reason or that for this reason, and then just kind of let it go because maybe it's uncomfortable to say,
yeah,
look, Joe, I know it's tough. That's the job. You got to choose A or B,
yeah.
and one of those is better than the other for some reason.
I think what's nice about the canvas that I have is if you hedge your bets in the first couple of boxes of it, you're suddenly going to find the next box really hard because the idea is that essentially the focus narrows as we go through. And if you've not narrowed down sufficiently as you go through, it gets really hard to answer these questions, and that does sometimes happen. And as a result, often they all, like, people almost figure it out for themselves. They kind of see why that's hard and go, oh, this is difficult because I didn't make a decision back there. And it's like, yeah, it's like, all right, cool, let's go back and make that decision. It's like, yeah, okay, cool.
Shit, did I do that?
So, yeah, no, you didn't. Not yet,
I bet
anyway.
I did.
So yeah, so I think, like I say, normally it's a bit longer in terms of the workshop. It might sometimes even be a couple of sessions, just because I think sometimes people need that space and time to mull it over and think about things. So I think in the interest of this, maybe like a condensed version, I think would be best. And so we can kind of almost like quickly work through all of it to a certain extent. And it might be that you have to make snap decisions that normally you wouldn't, but like, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we'll invent a whole new way of approaching this, which is like
Yeah.
the 5 minute point of view canvas. Yeah. And basically we'll go through it all to get a flavor of the kind of discussions that happen. I think it's going to just be a condensed sort of sped up, but almost like watching it on fast forward, I think is what
Okay.
it's going to be
Yeah,
like.
that sounds great.
Cool. All right. Well,
Yeah. So for context's sake, we've worked on this project. I mean, a little bit, but over the last month, exchange a little bit of information. Like I gave Joe kind of the intake information, and so he could start putting his thoughts together, so we could show up here and try to like workshop our way through the rest of this. So the idea is to demonstrate like how he works his magic. We're going to pull back the curtain on his sorcery.
So here's the canvas. Here's the four pillars. Pillars is probably the wrong word because they're horizontal, but here's the four pillars that I mentioned: ICP, problem, blind spot, opportunity. Each of these boxes is essentially a kind of a question and answer sort of thing that we need to work through.
Mm-hmm.
So starting with the ICP, because I think this is the one you're probably clearest on at the moment, it's safe to say. In the stuff that you sent over beforehand, I kind of got down here B2B service, B2B creator businesses. Does that feel, is that generally the right sort of area for you?
Yep.
That's cool. And obviously in your case, the person is going to be the founder or owner of those businesses, right? Like that's safe to say. So, okay, well, that was easy.
It took me a long time to get there.
Well, this is funny because obviously in your case you're very clear on that, which essentially makes the hardest part done. With clients, often this is the big sticking point, right? This is, as we discussed earlier, this is the biggest decision to make, is where you want to focus in terms of the type of business or the person. Do you want to specialize in a certain industry? Do you not want to? Why should you? Why shouldn't you? Like that could sometimes be a whole session in itself, right? And so the fact that you've already done that is, go ahead.
I think for me, what's made it easier for me to get there, and I see this happen all the time, is letting go of this belief that, or assumption that, just because I'm focused on them doesn't mean that I will not work with anyone outside of that. Like it doesn't imply anything about anybody outside of that. It's just saying this is what I'm focused on.
There's a really weird kind of paradox that happens when you kind of niche down. I've found both in my own experience and with clients' experiences, is that it often feels that, so when you niche down, obviously it means that your marketing, your messaging, everything can become a lot more resonant with those people. But what's funny is, because your messaging becomes so strong, even people outside of that target client bracket are won over by it. They kind of see it and go, oh yeah, this is really cool, I want to work with them. Even if it's not speaking to them directly, the fact that it's speaking to someone for some reason makes people that don't fit the bracket like it as well. And it's a weird paradox. I think that like the more you narrow down like that, the more opportunities from outside of the niche happen, right? Like it's
when I reached out to Roland, I knew at that point I realized like that he was focused on agencies. I'm not an agency. I was like, I don't care. I want to talk to you, like, because I like the way that you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah. A good story at Treacle about this was that obviously, we were agency focused. And I remember one time an architect came to us, needing our help. And like, we took it on. It quickly transpired we probably shouldn't have taken it on because we didn't know anything about architecture. But like the point is, they looked at us came to us and were like, we know you work just with agencies, but could you work with us as an architects? Like, there was nothing remotely related to what we were talking about. Do you know what I mean? But like, they obviously saw something in our messaging and positioning and went, that's what we need for ourselves.
Yep.
So yeah, it definitely does happen. And so I think you're right that like if you can get it, it is a fear, right? That's all. It's a risk averse thing to be like, actually, I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket here. I don't want to narrow my focus too much. But all of the I've never heard it not work for someone. Do you know what I mean? Like it seems like every time someone does that and narrows
Yep.
down,
If
it
it didn't
works.
work, you
And
didn't do
so
it right.
yeah, like yeah, it sometimes the kind of common advice and common wisdom is there for a reason, right? Like it's because it works.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I get it. It's a fair thing. I've had it myself with my own business. Like I having been on the other side, I understand it. I think it is just one of those things you kind of have to get over if you want to do this. And
Yeah.
or not, and that's fine. Don't do it.
Yeah.
That's also fine. So yeah, so your ICP is really clear, which is really good. It's a good start. In terms of the problem, so I think you're quite clear on what they're trying to achieve. And so the thing that I pulled out from the stuff you sent over was this kind of idea of like figuring out how to scale. Like that's kind of that's what they're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I suppose I'm curious as to why they aren't able to figure that out in the first place.
Probably not totally understanding what scale is. So there's probably confusion
Mm,
between what growth and scale, like I guess
okay.
technically what that means. Um, I think there are also like scales not necessarily a simple thing to occur.
Yep.
And when if you consume a lot of information online, or especially like social media, then you tend to be told that it is a simple thing, and uh, so they're fed. They get a lot of information that's misdiagnosing
Mm-hmm.
or oversimplifying. I think a lot of businesses, especially when you like get into the creator businesses, service businesses less so,
Mm,
but it still exists. But creator businesses, they are maybe very skilled at the subject matter or the profession, but they don't have the business background or
okay. Yep.
knowledge, and so that is you don't have to you don't have to have an MBA to scale a business or run a good
Mm,
business, period.
yep.
However, there's some fundamental knowledge that you have, some things that have to be done or accounted for, and you have to be aware of them and know of them to to account for them. So
Yeah.
lacking that experience or knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It almost feels like there comes a point where either, like if we're talking specifically about the creators, because I do think it's probably more in line with them, they like you say, they almost start because they're really good at their particular skill and specialism and never learn the business side of it, right? They almost see it as it's they're just doing
Mm-hmm.
their thing that they like. And I guess there must come a point in every kind of creator's maturity levels where they make the choice to either stay there in terms of like, I'm just going to be really good at copywriting, right? And that's cool, that's fine, you can make a decent living from that. Or do you want it to become a business sort of thing? Right, that's the difference, isn't it? In terms of
Mm-hmm.
like at that point, it kind of grows bigger than you. It's kind of like actually at this point, yes, it could still be a one person thing, but like you're treating it as a separate entity to yourself, right? Like it's almost like
Right.
it's not just you anymore. It's now a fully fledged thing on its own. And
They're
that's
going
really
from
where
treating it, looking at it like a job, even if they're
yes,
independent.
yeah, yeah,
It,
yeah.
it really is a job.
Mm,
To This is going to be a business.
yeah. No, that's really cool. I mean, do you think that's the biggest thing that's holding people back then out of all of this? Is that lack of the knowledge and the sort of business background?
Well, I guess we could apply that more broadly and say yes, like they have not done the thing, they have not crossed the threshold that they're trying to cross with growth or scale before. So even if they do kind of have some understanding of business, that, I mean, some of these people have been in business for a long time, but they've
Mm.
just been like at this level and never been able to crack the code, right? It's like they've been on a hamster wheel all since the beginning, and they can sustain the hamster wheel, but you can only run so fast. And what they're envisioning is they see the potential for so much more, but they can't run faster. They're going to have to go from hamster wheel to like 10-speed bike, and
Okay, yeah.
they've never done it. They don't know how to do it. So I guess if you want to look at it like they lacking that experience, their knowledge, then yeah, that is definitely the biggest. It, yes.
No, it's a cool analogy. Because I think what this talks to in a way, if we sort of look at it a bit of a hierarchy, is that they're kind of stuck on this hamster wheel, partly because they lack that knowledge. But I think, like you're saying, it's almost like there's almost like a they have at the moment they just have to keep treading water, right? To mix analogies here, like they're
Uh-huh. And
to
sometimes the situation's not terrible, right? Like
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah,
they may have what you'd call a business. Technically it's a business. It's a most characteristics look like it's a job, except they probably make a little bit more money, but they
hmm
work a little bit more. But but it is not going to break through that ceiling because you cannot run any faster than the fastest you can run, and that's
yeah.
all. That's what they've been doing, and they can
So
keep doing, but it's not going to realize the potential that they envision.
it's actually less about the. It's almost like they feel like the way forward is to run faster, and you what you're saying is actually you need to replace the wheel entirely, right? Like to carry on this analogy, it's like actually
Yes.
you need to upgrade the business that
Yeah.
you're in rather than just do the same business more. Like that's the difference, right?
Yep.
Like it's
It's all of those people that are like, the grind mentality, and their
yeah,
response to things is typically like, I just need to, I'll do it. I'll go harder. Like you can't, that doesn't scale, right? that
yeah,
that's
yeah,
what got you to here, and kudos, great job. But like, if you envision like actually scale, you're
yeah.
going to kill yourself if you try to do grind through it. Yeah.
Yeah, that is that. Like there are ultimately limits to that, right? And I suppose that's why you need to change the entire way you work rather than just working harder.
That's it.
So okay, that's really interesting. I think it'd be good to move on and talk a bit about the blind spot here. So as I mentioned earlier, when I say competitors, it's not always a competitor directly. It's kind of a different the current way they're trying to solve this. Do you think it's more likely that the kind of clients that you're going to try and attract will be looking at other coaches like yourself or not?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Even if they're not in the awareness, haven't reached that stage of awareness yet, like they're open to it if they're exposed to the right information. Like it clicks with them pretty quickly.
So so chances are they're going to be comparing you to other people that do similar things. Is that right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
like they're ultimately like if they're trying to figure out how to scale so yeah, here's the interesting thing, they're trying to figure out how to scale, they probably don't know why they can't, and what they're looking for is guidance as to why they can't. Your approach is going to be based around this fact that it's because you're stuck on this you obviously don't if you use the phrase stuck on the hamster wheel, but like that you're saying you're sort of stuck going around in circles. What you need to do is this and sort of go through this process where we can help upgrade your wheel, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And so the key is that at this point they don't know that that's the solution yet. So when they're figuring out how to scale, they're going to be looking at yourself. They might be looking at other business coaches who also are going to help them figure out how to scale, or at least claim to, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that means that your competitors in this case are going to actually be direct competitors, right? They're going to be
Mm-hmm.
other business coaches. Is that fair to say? Like,
Yep. It is.
and in that case, generally speaking, and it's fine to generalize here. um, how do these other business coaches tend to approach this? How do they tend to help or try to help?
Are we looking for like the flawed perspective?
At this point, anything that they do, and then I think we can try to pick holes in it afterwards.
Okay, so like one-on-one engagements, and well, there are probably two separate groups. There are those who do try to solve through one-on-one engagements, and those who try to push you into groups.
Yep.
Um, and let's see.
Do you do both of those things, or do you focus on one?
I focus on one. I currently
Okay.
I recommend both.
What does that mean?
So I deliver one, but I would tell clients like everybody should be in. You need to have a one-on-one coach. You need to be a part of a big community, at least one, and you need to be part of a small, like a peer advisory board or mastermind group.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if I don't deliver one of those things, then we just figure out there are options out there. We figure out which direction for them to go.
Okay. But you're saying that at some point in the future you might be offering more than just one-to-one engagements. Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
I will be doing groups.
Okay, cool.
Mhm.
So if we take each of these at a time with the one-to-one engagements, so in terms of like the approach, then like what if you think about the way you approach the work, and you don't need to tell me what that is yet because we'll get to that, but like you obviously have a philosophy behind
Mhm.
what you do, and it's probably based around this stuck on the hamster wheel idea that we've mentioned already.
Mhm.
What do you think? And it might be partly guesswork this because you're not going to know other coaches' methods as much as your own, but like, what do other coaches tend to do in terms of their philosophy and approach?
So they usually they're going to be kind of have one thing. So they may have a method like a strategic planning method like EOS,
Yeah.
or maybe they don't, and they are kind of just sharing best practices, knowledge, skills, and it's more on like it's a very superficial type of
Right.
solutioning. It's not it's not transformational. It's not developmental, right? It's like band-aids. Um,
Yeah. Okay.
then
That's quite interesting. That's quite interesting as a weakness, though. Is that like you're saying it's almost like what did you call it? Did you say surface level or something along those lines?
um, yeah, they're
Um,
solving surface level things. It's not they're not solving long term, like they're not creating a transformation that's going to like sustain. So basically, it's like giving you a little turbo boost on your hamster wheel.
right. Yeah.
Um, but it's artificial. Well, that I shouldn't say that.
I
It,
can't wait to see your new website full of hamsters.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Okay. Surface level, not a sustained
yeah,
transformation.
it's not
I'm
it's
gonna
not
put
transformational.
turbo boost hamster wheel.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah. Cool. Okay.
lacking. So for example, if somebody's using a strategic planning methodology, that's great. Um, like what I use something similar to that as a part of what I do. So I guess like my comparison to these other solutions is like as my solution as the basis, right? I think you've got to have an operating system. I think you've got to have leadership development. I think there are components that have to be a part of this,
Hmm.
and and those others are missing components of that for it to be like transformational change. We're talking about the scaling a business for someone who hasn't done that before. So to accomplish that goal, you have to scale the business, but you have to become a different business owner too.
Mm.
So we're not just like coming. I can't just come in and say, "Here's a different system. You got it now." Like you're gonna have to learn to be the leader of that business
Yeah.
that you're trying to build at the same time. So if we neglect the business or the business owner, we're not really going to create like a sustainable um, solution or outcome.
Yeah, I I think there's something quite interesting in that. It kind of goes back to what we said before about that kind of there comes that tipping point where it's either carry on in your own sort of in your hamster wheel, so to speak, or see it as a business that you're a leader of, but it's not you. It's kind of extricating yourself from the business and seeing it as two set. You there's you and there's your business,
Mm-hmm.
not there's you and your business in kind of one merged thing. It's kind of actually it's healthier from a growth perspective to see them as separate and to separate them out and be like, there's you, there's your business. If you work on the business rather than just on yourself, that's where the results come from. Almost, it's almost like actually you need to fix the business rather than just fix yourself. Like that's the
Well,
kind of
they both need fixing.
yeah.
Like yeah, it's the business is probably more symptomatic. If we really wanted to get deep into it, all problems are leadership problems. So it comes back
Mm.
to the problem with the situation is you've created it. So like, let's fix what you don't know how to do, and then you can go and fix the business. But that's really like, you know, when they come to you and they want to talk about scaling a business, it'd be really hard to divert their attention to that. If we
But that's the right approach as far as you're concerned, though, right? Is to
I think it's the right approach is to come in and kind of diagnose and see between the two entities, like where do we start? Because there are going to be issues with
mm.
both that would have to be addressed. It's like there's a leadership development track for the individual, and then there's like a business growth track for the organization. And
If you had to, yeah. Oh, sorry, God.
and I think they would come in thinking that it's going to be like it's really about this the business, the mechanic stuff. What do we need to fix under the hood here to get this thing
Mm.
to sort of go as fast as I think it should go? That's fine. We can do that. That's kind of could be like giving turbo to your hamster wheel, and
Yeah.
you're going to be back shortly. What we should do to solve this correctly is address both and
Mm.
figure out like the business needs this to improve. Here's the bottleneck. And you are trying to go from where you're at to here as a leader. So we need a plan for you to be moving in that direction too. Because the leader now can't run the business. It can't lead the business that you are trying to create.
Yes. Okay, I see. Yeah, yeah. So actually, what we're really saying is, in this blind spot section, a lot of coaches actually, when we're talking about the surface level, not transformational, turbo boosting the hamster wheel, it's because they're focusing more on the kind of business mechanics than the actual person as well. And you're
Mm-hmm.
saying that yes, you should definitely fix the business mechanics, but if you're not also addressing the individual that's going to lead that business, it doesn't matter, is what you're saying. Like they end up falling into the same trap as they were in before.
Yes.
Okay, well that's really interesting because what we're almost saying is like your approach focus it your I mean I don't have a cool term for it, but but like your approach is almost like it's I'm just the thing that comes to mind is that whole kind of like separation of like mind and body or whatever it is that it happens in philosophy. I don't know, duality, that's what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Is like that kind of duality model of, like instead of a singular focus and seeing you and your business as one thing, which is what most coaches do, and just kind of tinker around the edges, you're saying, look, actually, I'm going to split you up into you and your business, and we're going to work on both of those parts in tandem. Because if you just fix one, then it doesn't work. You need to kind of fix, but it's almost like
Right.
swapping the hamster wheel for a bicycle, right?
Yeah.
Because now you've got
Yes, it
two
is.
wheels. Now
And really,
you've
you
got
can't even diagnose one as well without considering the other.
yeah,
So, the when you get into solutioning, the problems, the priorities at the moment might be 90% in one entity or the other at the moment.
yeah,
But like this is a process, right? There's a journey to it, so that's going to evolve.
yeah. No, I like that. Like I think. I think there's something about separating the kind of individual from the business and seeing them as two things. I'm going to call it a duality approach for now, but it doesn't have to be called that. but like I think that's a really interesting perspective here. And I know we've obviously rushed through this for the purposes of the podcast, and normally we delve into it a lot more and kind of start sense checking it, right, and picking it apart a bit as well. But I think the seeds are here, which is this idea of like where most coaches are purely focused on fixing the business, you're there to fix both the business and the leader, the individual, the founder, because otherwise it's not going to be a long-term impact. It's just going to be a sort of short-term boost. And that's it, really. That's
it. You said it.
Cool. There we go. Well, I'll stop sharing for now so we can sort of go back into conversation mode. So look, I think to give some extra context around this, normally what would happen in an engagement with a client is that like we would properly start to solidify that. We'd kind of come up with some languaging around it. So the naming thing that I was going to mention earlier, this is where that comes in as being quite an important thing, because so this is something that like in the kind of world of category design and category creation, which I definitely recommend reading about if you're interested in this point of view stuff. It was a big inspiration for how I think about it. They talk about this thing called languaging, which is a really, it's not a nice word, but fine. And and their whole idea is when you come up with a kind of problem or like incorrect solution the old way and you come up with your new way, you should name them in a way with like a 2 or 3 word phrase that succinctly captures here's what's wrong, here's the new way to do it. And it just kind of gives you ownership of it. Like it doesn't, technically own it, and you never will, and you shouldn't own it. But like it gives you a kind of phrase that sticks in people's minds. And so like once upon a time, I came up with category conformity to describe this idea of, or when you're in a crowded category, everyone starts to sound the same, right? They start to conform. Mm-hmm. I've had prospects say that phrase to me. Sometimes I think not realizing I made it up, and they're kind of like, "Oh yeah, it's this kind of like category conformity." That's my phrase. I'd say, but it's a really good sign that like it resonates with them, and that's the memorable takeaway when they read your stuff. Yep. So generally speaking, we don't have to do that now, obviously, but like generally speaking, that would kind of be the next step, is to sort of like, okay, if this is what we're going with, what do we call it? And I came up with duality approach. I'm not saying that's the one, but like that's the thinking that I was starting to move towards, is actually what do we call your philosophy here? What do we call that? What do we call the opposite of that? Mm-hmm. In a way that will stick in people's heads a bit more and give you that kind of ownership. And then in terms of the process, what I would recommend doing is kind of writing it up in a way that you can make sense, that it kind of just makes sense to you. I like to sort of almost liken it to a bit of a manifesto, and it doesn't need to be like a hard hitting, like come and join the cause manifesto, even if it's just a 1 paragraph version of what we've just said that kind of outlines the points and the thinking. And that's almost like a little elevator pitch for your point of view. And then what I would do is I would start planting the seeds of that in content on LinkedIn, for example, or speaking with potential clients or existing clients, and just kind of not running it by them in the sense of like, oh, hey, can I run this by you and get some feedback, but just kind of slipping it into the conversation, seeing the kind of reaction it gets and see how it lands. And that's a way to kind of at least start validating it. I'm a big believer that to a certain extent, if everyone kind of agrees with it instantly, then you're maybe just stating the obvious and it's maybe not that interesting a point of view. Mm-hmm. But if it makes people kind of just go, yeah, I've never thought of that. That's the kind of response. It's that kind of like a positive curiosity around it. If they give you that, then you know that you're kind of onto a winner here. It's like, oh, I hadn't seen it that way. That's what you want, because you want to really change their perspective of the problem. You want to go, oh, mm-hmm. I've never thought of that. That's what you kind of look for. And if all the signs are there and it feels like that's the right way, then I think it's just at that point, that's great. It's just kind of a matter of developing it further through content, putting on some version of it on your website and communicating it through there, whatever your sales marketing channels are. Obviously, that varies from person to person. But yeah, generally, once you kind of get that point of view, your job is to just hammer it home as much as you can, right? And I think a big part of the value I provide afterwards, after coming up with the original stuff, is kind of sticking around and being a sounding board for the kind of content around it. Mapping the content pillars and stuff out from there. Like, what do we talk about? How do we talk about it? But also, kind of to go back almost to the start of this, where we were talking about how there's most founders have commitment issues when it comes to this kind of thing, and they don't want to they don't want to put all their eggs in one basket. It's really important to do that once you've got your point of view, because if you start just drifting away from it and saying loads of other things, your point of view just gets lost in your own noise, and it's like, oh, what's the point? So, like, there's an accountability angle, I think, that someone like myself or even you would provide, right? Like, I'm sure it's the same with you and your clients. Is part of a big part of it is like
Mm-hmm.
holding them accountable for what the decisions they make.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think
that's I think
the
really important.
major difference there is like having the eye to be able to catch when the drift is more subtle.
Yeah. Yep.
If it's like
Mm-hmm.
completely overlooking it or getting offline and it's obvious, I'm there for that. But having someone, and I'm probably speaking from my own perspective too, is like, so I've kind of gotten over this obstacle. I think of, I know that setting a precise target is not implying that I will not work with anyone else. Like
Sure.
I'm not
Yeah.
thinking about that. But
Yeah.
then the next challenge that I run into is as I work through this, still like kind of separating the forest from the trees. Like I think one of the things that you were doing there in that conversation that was really helpful was I felt like you kind of course corrected me a few times where maybe nudging me back like toward what was relevant or what you felt like was the
Mm.
epicenter of the topic. And if someone's not there to do that, like,
Yeah.
you can unintentionally continue to just creep over and over. And before you know it,
Yeah.
I've written the same shit that I've written, how many
I
times,
I think it's funny because I think the very thing that makes founders really good at what they do is also the same thing that makes them really bad at sticking to this one idea and keeping with it. Do you know what I mean? Like I think naturally founders are predisposed to that kind of shiny object syndrome. They see other things. They're often quite intelligent, capable people, right? And so they could turn their heads in different ways. They could do that. They could do this. It's that kind of relentless focus that is actually a really tough thing for founders to have. If you're only good at one thing, well, it's really easy to focus, right? Because it's like, oh, cool, I'll just do that because I'm good at that.
Yeah.
But most founders have quite a broad skill set, and so they can pivot in different directions, and that's the very thing that's dangerous about it in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like
Um,
that creativity and it can kind of hinder you putting up the boundary and staying focused
yeah,
on what is like, this is most important at
yeah.
the moment.
The other important aspect of this, which I probably haven't covered as much, is living through that point of view. Like, it's one thing to communicate it and be like, look, here's my perspective, here's my approach. You also have to do that, right? When it comes to the work. Like, if a client comes to you and it's like, yeah, I love this duality approach, let's do it, and then you don't do it, it's like, oh well, now you've just missold them. And I think sometimes this work, if you do this work right, sometimes it should actually change your process as well
Mm-hmm.
and your approach. And it might be that you have to, come up with a similar canvas to mine or something, right? And be like, actually, we need the two wheels to show how it works. Like it might be that the very way you do the work shifts slightly as well as to deliver that
Mm-hmm.
promise of the point of view in the first place. And that's often something that people might need guidance with as well in terms of just this sort of offer design and service design around that.
Yeah. I mean,
But
you're forcing me to, or it's forcing someone to get further, like inside the mind, see the world through the eyes of their ICP.
mhm,
So, of course, I mean, I would assume you're going to learn more there that would help you optimize how you solve things. I
yeah.
mean, let's be honest, your shit's probably not as good as you think it is solution wise. So, um, Like, I know that, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think one of the classic versions of that is when you talk to someone and they're like, oh, we've got this really cool process. Go on, then what is it? And it's the same process that everyone has. It's like, oh yeah, well we do this like discovery work. It's like, yeah, yeah, everyone does that. Yeah, cool. It's like, yeah, and then we do some strategy. Yeah, cool. And then we deliver on it. Yeah, all right, cool. Yeah, no, never heard of those things before. And it's like, it's like that's not new.
Right.
But if you go, it's the coming up. It's hard to just come up with a cool new process if you don't have the point of view. That's the key thing. Because actually, you could just do anything at that point, and you end up reverting to the generic thing because it could be anything.
Mm-hmm.
When you're obsessed with solving that one problem and solving it in that particular way, it becomes a lot easier to focus what you do and how you achieve that as well. Because it's like, well, you're already naturally focused in terms of how to solve that problem.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found the show valuable, you can say thanks and show your support simply by taking a quick second to like, share, and comment on the show. You can also find more information about each of my guests, all of the resources from the show, and myself at nickberry.info/TBOJ.